As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. Welcome to the March meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. As all members have received a copy of the proposed minutes of our January meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Are there any suggested changes to those minutes? All right. One change we have in District 1, Donald Kelly was present, so that name will be removed from the list of absence. And District 11, Rebecca Steinfeld was also present, so we will make those two changes. Are there any additional proposed changes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as amended stand adopted upon unanimous consent. Joan Caldwell, Chair of District 10.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, many, many years ago, my mother observed that the world seemed to lose an inordinate number of good people during the holidays. Certainly this past Christmas season bore that out. Greenwich lost far too many good citizens. Among them were two, Everett Fisher and Emerson Stone from District 10, which is why I come to you before you tonight. Everett and Emerson were very different men, yet in many ways they were the same. Everett was a native with deep roots in Greenwich. Emerson came into our community as a young man and laid down his roots. Everett found his calling in the words of the law, making that his profession. Emerson used his ability with words to reach that broad sector of the public through broadcast and writing. Everett confined his practice of law to local courts and boards, while Emerson worked in the large, tumultuous world of New York news media. So very different, these men, and yet so alike. Both were kind and soft-spoken, despite being passionate in their views. Everett and Emerson each had a deep and abiding reverence for the land, for its preservation and its continued openness. Both men believed in volunteerism and gave freely of their time and their talents to this town. Everett Fisher joined the RTM from District 10 in 1958 and served as vice chairman of our then Planning and Zoning Committee. He served for several terms. In 1963, he was elected to the BET and remained a member for 17 years, during which time he moved from member to clerk to vice chairman. Emerson Stone was appointed to the Inland Wetlands Agency as an alternate in 1988 and made a full member in 1972. He served continuously until 1997, eventually becoming the agency's secretary. Then, in 2005, Emerson was elected to this body from District 10, where he served for 3 terms, bringing his knowledge of land use to bear. District 10 asks that you now join with it in acknowledging with appreciation, on behalf of the people of Greenwich, the service and contributions of Everett Fisher and Emerson Stone, and that our gratitude and our sympathies be expressed to their families.
Will the members please rise and join me in a moment of silence in memory of Everett Smith and Emerson Stone. Thank you. Karen Fosliotis, a former member of District 7.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. On February 2nd, 2015, the town of Greenwich and state of Connecticut lost a longtime public servant and lifelong daughter of Greenwich, Barbara A. Carbino, Chief Clerk of the Greenwich Probate Court and District 7 resident. Barbara began her career in the Greenwich Probate Court by working as a temp in high school before being hired full-time in 1960. She left the court in 1969 to raise 2 children, Frank and Cindy, before returning to the court in 1981. She rose to chief clerk in 1991 and served in that capacity until her untimely death. At the time of her death, Barbara had worked at the Greenwich Probate Court for 45 years. Needless to say, Barbara was the heart and soul of the probate court during her tenure there. She was a compassionate individual who, although not formally trained as an attorney, knew the ins and outs of the state law that could run rings around many of the attorneys who frequented the court, including myself. Affectionately known as Mother Superior by Judge David Hopper and the other clerks at the court, Barbara ran the court benevolently but firmly and made sure that whoever had matters before the court, whether it was an attorney, an individual who was mentally challenged, or a child that needed assistance, was treated fairly and with dignity and respect. She looked at those she worked with and for as her family, and jokingly made up adoption papers for Judge Hopper, naming him her number 2 son after her own son, Frank. Barbara loved nothing more than cooking Sunday dinners and hosting family and friends at her home. She cherished her family's annual trip to Longboat Key, Florida, and took particular delight in spoiling her 2 granddaughters, Ryan and Samantha Carbino. Her greatest accomplishments in her life were her love and devotion to her family and her deep passion for the job she had in the probate court. District 7 wishes to express their gratitude for the many years of service that Barbara Carbino gave to the town of Greenwich and the state of Connecticut, and moves that these comments be included in the minutes of the meeting so that future generations may know of her service to our town.
Thank you. Will the members please rise to observe a moment of silence in memory of Barbara Carbino? Thank you. David Detchen, Chair of our Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, one of the tasks of the Labor Contracts Committee is to apprise other officials in the town of what are the general sentiments within the RTM about various labor contract matters. And those of us who are on the Labor Contracts Committee have various ways of getting a sense of the mood of the RTM. One, of course, is just by listening to what goes on here. Another is by listening to what is said in our various district committees. Another is listening to what's said in the various standing committees of which we may be members. And of course, we also get buttonholed from time to time as members of the Labor Contracts Committee by various members of the RTM who want to express to us their particular point of view about a particular topic in regard to labor contract negotiations. Nevertheless, since I've been chairman, we have had every once in a while an open session of the Labor Contracts Committee where we meet and basically invite anyone from the RTM to come before us and give us their views on any particular aspect of labor contracts they want to speak to. And it's now time for us to have another one of those open sessions. and we have scheduled one for 28 May at 8 o'clock p.m. in the Cone Room. Any member of the RTM is welcome to attend and give us your peace of mind about any particular aspect of labor contract negotiations. Let me emphasize that although labor contracts have an impact on our town budget, this will not be a session about budget making or budget oversight. That's what we have two standing committees for. This particular open session will be about the labor contract negotiation process and goals, since that's the jurisdiction of the Labor Contracts Committee. Thanks.
And one more time, what that was?
28 May, 8 o'clock p.m. in the Cone Room.
Thank you. Irv Porter, District 12, and one of the RTM liaisons to the CIP committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There, on the back table, just as you come in, there's a copy of my remarks, but I'm not going to read them. I'm going to summarize them with the expectation that if you want to know more, you can take a copy of the written remarks with you. It's basically broken down into 6 items. First, a little background on the liaison role that Dan Osmura and I have on behalf of the RTM. Secondly, the planning implication with regard to that. Third, the implications relative to the budget, since our focus as liaison is to focus on capital projects. Next, to share a couple of points with regard to a forum that we had that was led by Joan Sullivan and her counterpart in the Board of Education on procurement protocol practices and the learning that came from that that's applicable in terms of my own conscience to share the comments that I'm making tonight. And last, our observations. On the back of this particular piece, you'll find what I call a scorecard of the performance of the RTM and the town in general on 9 capital projects. You need not look at that now. I'll walk you through the concept behind it, and it's intended to be exactly what I suggested, a scorecard as to how we as the RTM and the town did. First, on background, some time ago, at the pleasure of the first selectman, 2 people were chosen from the RTM to act as liaison to the CIP committee. We are there as liaison. We can engage in whatever is proper discourse, but basically we're there as liaison with the role being to report back to you what our observations are with regard to capital projects. My predecessor, Josh Brown, and I participated in this for a number of years, and Dan took Josh's place, as you know. We honored him with a standing ovation not long ago. And basically, this time around, the first selectman chose to engage both the committees that were established by the first selectman to implement, to execute those actionable items that came out of the Plan of Conservation and Development, number 1, and number 2, to engage the CIP group in that regard as well. My own observation is that the first selectman's intention through all of that was to make sure that the process side of the budget was more clearly understood, and if there's a way that it could be made more efficient, more effective, process-wise, that we should pay heed. Following that, we had a discussion with Joan Sullivan, who I mentioned a moment ago, as a result of a unanimous endorsement by the Finance Committee to learn more about the overall procurement process throughout the town. The engagements were with Joan and some of her staff, John Crary, as well as Joan's counterpart in the Board of Ed. That particular occasion was in conflict with Alan Manelli's schedule, and he was not able to attend. The takeaway message of all of that is if you thought that we had a centralized procurement function in town, you could be very, very wrong. The protocols, the practices, the policies associated with procurement are very much in keeping across the town. But as far as the implementation of the procurement process, particularly when it comes to capital projects, is different because there is usually a separate building committee that has been appointed to implement a given project. And although the protocol practices and privileges of that committee should be adhered to pursuant to the procurement manual of the town, I can't tell you whether or not that's implemented exactly the same way for every project or not. So the takeaway message there is that when it comes to major capital project items, that it is a decentralized approach. Our observations are intended just to raise a couple of questions with you as we now enter the hard part, the difficult part for us of the budget season. Do we plan bottom up? Define needs, prioritize, and plan based on those priorities and our financial capabilities? Or do we plan top down? Establish a mill rate that is politically acceptable and competitive with the communities with whom we compete for commercial and residential customers, as well as competing for those people that we employ in the town, either as teachers or firefighters or whatever their role might be, we have to compete with them. Top down, bottom up, a question. Do we in the RTM support funding for a feasibility study for a prospective project? And when we do we clearly understand the reason for the study, the possible outcomes, and what happens after that study is complete? Third point, how credible are the funding requests we must approve for a capital project to proceed to completion, and do we fully understand the impacts on the operating budget, 80%, 75 to 80% of our overall budget, assuming that there is some corresponding need for town employees to staff, particularly a new facility? Fourth question, was there a full venting of the potential CIP projects prior to this year's budget that was in keeping with defining need, prioritizing, and appropriate funding? Our answer to this is the nature of the process that we used this year was different. It was at the first selectman's privilege to try to draw together those people that were involved in the overall planning process, and I am one, at least, that believes that that was in the spirit of making sure that we knew how the process could be made more effective, more efficient. So on the eve of our entering that period when there's hard work to be done relative to the budget, we looked at Ham Ave, Glenville, Police Station, Fire Station, Project Renew, a.k.a. Witherell, Mesa, Holly Hill up to now, the Byram Shore Project, and New Lebanon. And we did this in concert with Peter Minarski and Roland Geiger, whose role for the town, remembering that they worked for the BET, is to ensure that there are clear records with regards to the appropriations that you make, number one. Number two, what the impact is of those appropriations relative to the budget and what's been spent. You can call them bean counters because they're not here tonight. But you shouldn't call them bean counters. They are, to my way of thinking, the most important people when it comes to monitoring the overall effectiveness of what you approve in money and how well we do relative to capital projects. So I'll take just two projects and lead you through what it is you will find on the back of that first page. We had 4 criteria for each project. What was the first funding request date that we had to act, and how much money did we approve on that date? Second, the first time that there was a solid indication as to what the cost would be of that project and what the completion date would be of that project. The third is if there were subsequent funding requests, how much did those encompass in all? And last but not least, for all of those projects, what's the actual completion date and how much money did we really spend? So with Peter and Roland's help, we did the grunt work that was necessary to compose the little table that you'll find on the back of that page. Ham Ave, just one example. In 2004, 2005, it was conceived. The first appropriation that we made was $860,000 for A&E, architectural and engineering work. The first estimate that we had as to what it would cost was 2006, 2007. When I say 06, 07, I mean fiscal year 06, 07, remembering that that starts in July. And it was for $23.6 million. Subsequent funding was an additional $7 million. The actual completion date was 2008, by which time we had spent $31.1 million. The next one that I'll give you is Project Renew, just as a point of reference. First breath of Project Renew came after Bob Richardson's led group, which looked at, should we be in the business, should we not be in the business, what do we need to do in order to upgrade the facility so whether we stayed in the business or we didn't stay in the business, we had a facility that was competitive. And out of that, there was a convincing argument that you supported all the way through the appropriations process. And so from 2003, Bob's committee, to 2008, there was a total of $7.3 million spent. Between 2011 and 2013, another $22.6. Then there was a subsequent funding request for $900,000 in 13-14. And in 2014, when we celebrated completion of the facility and applauded those that were involved, including the new board from Witherell, we had spent $30.9 million. Now, when you do your homework, because this is a scorecard, it's not intended to be a witch hunt. It's intended to tell you factually what, based upon our best knowledge, we have spent on major capital projects. If you add all of those projects up, between 2008 and 2013, we've spent $215 million. Excuse me, I got my digits. $215 million. The original projections, the first projections for those projects, was $155 million. You can advertise that we overran by 28%. You can advertise that we underestimated by 28%. You can say whatever you want to about the changed circumstances, whether it be contamination that we had to deal with or whatever. But the hard number is 28%. I'm not going to judge whether that 28% on that scorecard was good or not.
All right,
that's up to you to judge.
Wrap it up.
That is the end of my report. Thank you for the interruption. If you have questions regarding this, Dan and I will be here after the meeting. And basically what we'll say, if you need factual answers to factual questions, you need to email Roland or Peter, and they look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. I sent out a communication to our district and committee chairs earlier today in advance of the district meetings and committee meetings tonight regarding the organization of our call. And I do have one change as a result of the input following our districts and committee meetings tonight. It is my intention shortly to recommend that we place the 3 incumbent members of the Condemnation Commission. Those would be items 2, 3, and 5 on our consent calendar, which, as you know, does not take committee reports or discussion. And to recommend that items 1, 4, and 6 be combined for voting purposes, and that we would then take up items 7, 8, and 9 separately. So at this point, pursuant to our rules, I will designate the following 3 items, and what I'm about to say, if those items remain on the consent calendar, this is all you will hear about them tonight. So I will designate for our consent calendar first item number 2, which is a resolution appointing Donald Conway to be a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring December 31, 2015. The second item that I will designate for the consent calendar is item 3, the appointment of Jackie Hammack to be a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring December 31, 2015. And the last item for the consent calendar that I will designate is item 5, the appointment of Paul Settlemeyer to be a member of the Condemnation Commission for a term expiring December 31, 2015. Are there any objections to the placement of those 3 items on our consent calendar? Hearing none, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, consent calendar items 2, 3, and 5, and proceed to poll your delegation. I will now recommend that items 1, 4, and 6 be combined for voting purposes. That requires a motion to suspend the rules. Is there such a motion? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 1, 4, and 6 for voting purposes. Motion to suspend the rules is not debatable and requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of combining items 1, 4, and 6 for voting purposes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. So we will begin with the combined calendar items, and when we dispose of those, we will then proceed in numerical order with the remaining items 7, 8, and 9. So item 1 now comes before us. Candace Garthwaite, Chairman of our Appointments Committee.
Good evening. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed member of the Condemnation Commission for the term expiring 12/31/15. Carl G. R. Carlson, Jr.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this, beginning with Candace Garthwaite? You want to give the Appointments Committee report?
Yes, thank you. The Appointments Committee met on February 3rd at Town Hall. 11 districts were represented. District 3 was absent. The Appointments Committee determined that we would vote by ballot for nominees for the Condemnation Commission. Therefore, a total of 11 votes was possible, and a majority of 6 votes was required. So the votes that I will report will not be in your usual manner of hearing. They will simply be one number. So Dr. Carlson received 7 votes out of 11. Dr. Carlson, you know, he's a long-standing member of the RTM from District 1, where he's currently the vice chairman, and he is a delegate to the Appointments Committee. He views himself as an independent thinker in matters as serious as condemnation, and feels that his longtime knowledge of Greenwich commercial districts is important to the work of the Commission, and he is very interested in becoming a member. He also has a master's and PhD in mathematics.
Thank you. Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
Good evening, everybody. The Land Use Committee met last Monday night. We had all 5 of the candidates for Condemnation Commission come up together as a panel, and including Mr. Carlson. All 5 of the candidates, which are items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tonight, they are all RTM members. As you heard, 3 of them are incumbents, and we're taking them together. But the Mr. Carlson and Jude Collins, which is item 4, they are new to the Condemnation Commission. We had a general discussion about the role of the Condemnation Commission. The Condemnation Commission is mentioned numerous times in our town charter. It's mentioned in sections on flood and erosion control, in sections on the parking department, and in the highways section. Mr. Carlson was particularly clear that the town would need to be exercise great scrupulousness determining any legal activity to avert any irregularities in the assessment of properties that might be condemned. As you probably know, the town has not condemned any properties in recent decades. They don't foresee any such need, but they said typically if there is a piece of property that the town needs, such as to widen a highway, the town is able to buy it. It doesn't get so far along in a process that the town would condemn it. But and all of the nominees tonight were clear that that would be a process that would require great, as he said, scrupulousness. So the vote on Mr. Carlson was 10-0-0-1 with District 10 absent. That is 10 in favor, 0 opposed, no abstentions. We had 1 district absent.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Discussion.
Moderator.
So that was, you just gave the report on item 1 or on?
I did.
Okay, that's fine. Discussion on item 1? All right, item 4. All right. We're waiting for the chair of our appointments committee.
So, Mr. Moderator, I can give you the votes on the others if you wish to hear them.
All right, we have an issue that's arisen, so why don't you do that? They will come before us shortly.
So the vote on item 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all the same, 10 in favor, none opposed, District 10 absent. The only difference was in item 5, Paul Settlemeyer, who abstained because he was the nominee.
Okay, thank you. Can you do a song and dance?
Well, so I'll mention that.
Where's our reporter when you need him?
I walked in about 20 minutes late because I was over at the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission was debating the new open space plan, which is coming here to the RTM next month or the month following. The open space plan is an addendum to the POCD, and therefore it's a critical document. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, it is on the town website. It was last updated in 2003. There are a number of fairly dramatic goals and recommendations in that plan. So I urge you all to look at it in advance of. There is a public hearing coming up at before the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll give you that date. On Tuesday night, March 24, so the Planning and Zoning Commission will have a public hearing on the open space plan. And then I think it's scheduled to come to us, the RTM, to adopt it in April.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Berg, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. What was discovered and just brought to my attention was that the term expiration dates for all 5 of these appointments is incorrect. So we have just voted, and I have the result of the vote on the consent calendar items 2, 3, and 5. Those in favor, 183, opposed 1, abstaining 0. So those items have carried. And in consultation with our town attorney, we can move to reconsider those 3 items and change the date, and then amend the date. All right, but what we'll do is we'll deal with the one before us right now, and then we'll come back to those 3. So, Candace Garthwaite,
I need help,
recognize
though.
you for a motion to amend item 1.
I do need to amend, but I need to get the exact date. So can John Eddy help me out here? Because he was the one that had it on his computer. I apologize for the delay.
Well, isn't it the end of the month that we just have the wrong month?
Well, I want to double check to make sure I get the correct year.
Okay.
It's the
16? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to confirm that. So I am making a motion to amend the
Item number 1.
item number 1, that the term for the Condemnation Commission would be expiring March 31, 16.
March 31, 2016, in other words, a year from now.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes. That's
Okay.
what I'm hoping that's correct. I don't have computer or the charter in front of me at this moment.
Well, what do we know?
Well, okay, so I am saying that it's March 31st, 2016.
All right, then why don't we leave it as it is, and we'll take this up at another meeting. Let's find out exactly what
Okay.
it is. And
Thank you.
Then, I have not accepted that motion to amend. I haven't asked for a
Okay.
second. Are you withdrawing it?
2 years.
2
Okay.
years from April 1.
Okay.
So they do
It should be
expire
correct.
March 31 is the expiration.
It is confirmed that it's March 31, 2016.
All right. I'm sorry. What year did you say?
It would be 2016. But we can delay it. It's fine with me.
She says even numbered year.
And the
I
even
think-
numbered years. Even numbered years. Thank you. You're
All right,
saying.
why don't we leave it as is, and we'll, Mr. Fox, may I have a moment?
Of course I.
All right, my concern is, I have a concern whether it would be in legal order to adopt a resolution with a term date that's incorrect. We can't change the term that's provided for by statute or whatever authority. So unless you are absolutely certain,
This is the charter.
This is the
the
charter.
recommendation would be to just put all of these off until we are certain.
Okay.
So what's the answer to that? Should we amend tonight, meaning you are certain as to what the correct date is, or should we put this off until we can? Obviously, the incumbents serve until replaced, so that's not a problem.
It does say in the charter, even-numbered years for 2-year terms, and so it does.
All right. So this raises one of those issues about making sure the terms of all of our appointees are correct, and
Correct.
that has been an issue over the
Yes.
years. So
Yes.
why don't since this is item 1, these are all new appointees.
But we already
Ms.
voted.
Krasner,
Well, I wasn't surprised that the day I seem to be corrected here, because I know that the Claims Committee people, their terms run with our terms.
right.
So the Condemnation Commission, seeing the 12/31/15, wasn't a surprise. That's not true. They don't run with our terms, as the Claims people do.
No, it's not an RTM committee.
Okay?
All right. So my recommendation, this is not an active commission either, is it? All right, so then my recommendation is let's go back and research this and make sure we know when the term started.
Okay.
All right? All right, now, we have currently before us this item, so we need to dispose of it by a parliamentary device. Shall we refer this back to the Appointments Committee? Yes. All right, is there such a motion? All right, it has been moved and seconded to refer item 1 to our Appointments Committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Right, we are now going to consider a motion to reconsider those, and,
Mr. Moderator?
yes.
Am I under the correct understanding that 4 and 6 have the same imperfection?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was your original question? Not 6.
No.
6 is not a,
Item 4 and 1?
all right, we have already voted on 2, 3, and 5. Those were the incumbents. So we're going to reconsider that, and we're going to
Item 1 has been referred.
refer those. We're going to refer everything.
And 4.
1 through 5.
Sorry?
1 through 5.
1 through 5. So now on the combined items, we have 6 combined with itself?
No. Combined only one was 1, what was it? 1, 4, and 6. That is correct. So that would leave, all right.
So we have a combined item number 6.
That we will eventually.
Might I move that we refer item 4 back to appointments?
All right. Well, hang on a minute. It's not even before us. So would you like to offer a motion to reconsider the vote on the consent calendar items?
I offer a motion to reconsider the vote on the consent items.
All right. Again, this needs to be offered by someone who voted on the prevailing side. I presume you did that. You voted for those consent calendar items. Is there a second? All those in favor of reconsidering the vote on the consent calendar items, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion to reconsider has carried. We'll now consider a motion to refer those items.
I'm putting forth a motion to refer the items, the
2, 3, and 5.
2, 3, and 5.
To the Appointments Committee. All right, is there a second? All those in favor of the motion to refer items 2, 3, and 5 to our Appointments Committee, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion to refer has carried. Item 4 now comes before us. Ms. Garthwaite. Why don't you offer 4 and 5 together?
I thought I just did 5.
I'm sorry. Oh, so 4, wait a minute. 2, 3, and 5. Oh, 4, just 4, just item 4. Thank you.
I make a motion that we refer item 4 back to the Appointments Committee.
All right, well, first, just present it. Tell us what it is.
Oh, you want me to read it? Okay.
Yeah.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed to the Condemnation Commission for the term expiring 12/31/15.
Jude Collins.
Jude
All right.
Collins.
That being offered on behalf of our Appointments Committee, it does not require a second and is currently before us. Ms. Garthwaite,
I make a motion to refer item 4 back to the Appointments Committee.
is there a second? All those in favor of the motion to refer item 4, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item is carried. Thank you very much.
My apologies.
All right, that happens. Item 6 now comes before us. Candace Garthwaite.
Item 6. I thought was item 6 part of the, okay. Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed alternate member of the Claims Committee for the term expiring 12/31/15. Klaus H. Yonder.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of our Appointments Committee, it does not require a second. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this? Ms. Garthwaite.
Yes. The Appointments Committee met on February 3rd, and Mr. Yonder received 11-0-0 votes, and he is currently a member of the RTM. He's resided in Greenwich since 1977. And Mr. Yonder has practiced international law in New York for over 40 years and retired from Clifford Chance in 2006, where he was the chairman of the German and Central European Practice Group, and also a member of the North American Regional Management Committee. Mr. Yonder continues to consult with international clients on global business and other legal matters. He also serves as director and/or officer of a number of multinational companies. He is an excellent candidate for the Claims Committee.
And your vote?
11-0-0.
Thank you. Doug Wells, Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Yonder came to our committee last Monday evening. He provided us with much the same historical background on his long career as an attorney. He told us his practice focused on litigation defense work and working with insurance companies. He's in his first term from District 8 RTM. This is his second attempt at joining the Claims Committee, this time as an alternate. His term will end on December 31st, 2015. Our committee was clearly impressed with Mr. Yonder's experience. We think he'll be a welcome addition to the Claims Committee. Our vote was 10-0 with Districts 3 and 4 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 6. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 6, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item number 7 now comes before us. Candace Garthwaite, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Yes, I'm offering a substitute resolution because there was a misspelling of Mr. Oka's name. Can I do that now?
Yes.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Appointments Committee be appointed alternate member of the Claims Committee for the term 12/31/15. Ryan C. Oka.
All right. And that the only change is the spelling of the last name, O-C-A. All right. Thank you. That being offered on behalf of our committee does not require a second and is now before us. Ms. Garthwaite, the report of the Appointments Committee.
Mr. Oka is a native to Greenwich, and he is serving his first term as a member of the RTM District 1, where he's a delegate to the Health and Human Services Committee. Mr. Oka graduated from Florida State University College of Law in 2011, where he specialized in international law. He is presently a temporary assistant clerk with the Stamford Superior Courthouse and feels privileged to observe and learn from the various judges there. He recently passed the Connecticut bar exam and is seeking a litigation position with a local law firm. The Appointments Committee asked him about potential conflict of interest with his current work, and he had asked Judge Tobin about this, and Judge Tobin did not feel there was any conflict, as he really is administrative in what he does there. Mr. Tobin also encouraged him to run for this particular role. Mr. Oka is clearly passionate about the law and his career going forward. He's a determined, persistent, and hardworking gentleman. Our vote was 10-0-1.
Thank you. Doug Wells with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
We met with Mr. Oka last Monday evening. We had some discussion concerning the fact that Mr. Oka is currently employed as a temporary assistant clerk and what that might mean when the town is involved in litigation in that courthouse. Our committee member from District 7 expressed reservations that Attorney Oka's lack of experience in the law would prevent him from providing meaningful help to the Claims Committee. However, more of our members seem concerned about the possibility of an appearance of impropriety or creating a potential conflict of interest or ethical issues for the town in connection with litigation in the Stamford Court involving the town. Mr. Oka was asked whether or not he'd addressed a potential conflict of interest if he were to serve as a clerk in a case involving the town. He responded that he had spoken with the chief clerk of the Stamford Court, and his supervisor said that she did not foresee a conflict of interest. Mr. Oka explained that his duties as a clerk include marking and preserving exhibits at trial, assisting the judge with scheduling, and to otherwise assist the judge in the conduct of a trial. He explained he does no legal research for the court on matters of law, nor does he help write memorandums of decision by the court. He has no involvement with the deliberative discussions of the juries, and very seldom does he sit in lobby conferences with the judge and attorneys. He believes he's therefore unlikely to be in a situation where he would have inside information available to him. Nevertheless, some of the members of our committee were concerned about the appearance of impropriety to have a clerk involved in a case where the town is a litigant and he is a member of the Claims Committee. Mr. Oka said he is not assigned to a single judge, but often shuttles from judge to judge depending on the trial schedule. He assured the committee that if he was assigned to a case involving the town, he would report this to his supervising clerk and to the judge to let the judge know that it would be preferable that he be assigned to a different judge. There was also some discussion that under the circumstances the town could be protected because it is likely the judge would disclose Mr. Oka's role to the all counsel of record, who could then be asked on the record whether his presence at the trial was acceptable to counsel. Even with this explanation, some committee members were still concerned about the fact that an enterprising attorney could use Mr. Oka's membership on the Claims Committee as a means to either set aside a verdict or as a basis for an appeal. Our vote on Mr. Oka was nevertheless approved. He was approved by a vote of 4-3 with Districts 8, 9, 10, and 11 abstaining, District 4 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 7. Ms. Krasner, District 5, to be followed by Mr. Von Keyserling, District 8.
Good evening, Lucy Krasner, District 5. I've never met Mr. Oka. However, I am planning to vote against his nomination. I think that the Claims Committee needs people of greater experience than somebody who has just gotten out of law school. These litigation matters that come before the court are sizable in nature, and the other members of the Claims Committee are seasoned attorneys or people very involved in the insurance field and know how to deal with suggestions to handle these very significant litigation issues that come before the town. I don't think somebody who is just out of law school, this is not the place to learn. Wouldn't that be interesting to learn? I think you need experience here, and just because he's being put on simply as an alternate in this particular case, on this particular committee, I don't think that that's a good learning position. I think you need more knowledge in that sense. I would call the body to one of the very finest moments of the body's handling of a nominee years back, Pamela Frank, who was nominated to be on the Planning and Zoning and had only lived here 2 years. And the vote was that she didn't have experience enough in the town on those matters and suggested that she become a member of the RTM. She became a wonderful member, and she headed up the Finance Committee and did a wonderful job in something that was right for her. I bring that up because I don't think that this is right for this man at this time to be on this very important Claims Committee. I would urge you all to vote against him at this time.
Mr. Von Keyserling, to be followed by Alexis Volgaris, District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Oka, not Orca, comes from, I believe his family has a long membership in COSCOB in my district, a well-respected family. I'd like to just get up and speak for the integrity and the fact that to reiterate in public that he has agreed to completely put a Chinese wall, as it were, between himself and any affairs in the clerk's office or the court that deal with the town of Greenwich. That satisfies me on that merit. I do understand Ms. Krasner's points on the depth of understanding of these things. I think it's a point that needs to be considered. I don't necessarily think that's a pivotal question, but I think it's a well-taken question. Thank you.
Alexis Vulgaris.
Good evening. I rise this evening to support the nomination of Mr. Ryan Oka to the Claims Committee. Mr. Oka presently sits on the Health and Human Services Committee, where he has been a thoughtful and involved participant. Even though this is Mr. Oka's, now I've got it going, Ryan, first term on the committee, he has been a quick study at absorbing all of the information related to GEMS and the 4 downtown departments that we cover. He asks pertinent questions during our meeting, has an excellent attendance record, and will readily admit that he needs additional information so that he can make an informed decision about an issue. I understand that the Legislation and Rules Committee felt that given Mr. Oka's present role as an assistant clerk with the Stamford Superior Court, that there was some concern that he may encounter a conflict of interest if nominated to the Claims Committee. The potential for a conflict is something that many prospective nominees to various committees have faced, and in each case the nominee said that he or she would recuse him or herself in a situation that would pose a conflict. Mr. Oka stated that he too would recuse himself, and hopefully this will satisfy any lingering doubts about his ability to serve effectively on the Claims Committee. Mr. Oka is eager to continue his volunteer work with Greenwich, and I hope that we will allow him to do so as a member of the Claims Committee, where even though he may be a newly minted lawyer and he has not had a tremendous amount of experience serving claims committees before, I think his dedication, his involvement, and the passion he's shown with Health and Human Services certainly warrants us considering him for this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 7. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 7, and proceed to pull your delegation. I have the result of the vote on item 6. This is the appointment of Klaus Yonder to be an alternate member of the Claims Committee. Those in favor, 188. Opposed, 0. Abstaining, 1. That item is carried. Item 8 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? Joe Siciliano, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. Item 8, resolved that the town of Greenwich accept a gift with an estimated value of $566,457 from the Greenwich Community Project Fund, Inc. for the installation of a September 11th memorial at COSCOB Park. This gift also includes a $25,000 endowment for routine maintenance.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 8 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this, beginning with Karen Sadekhan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and members of town meeting. Our committee met this evening. We canceled the meeting last week because of weather. This is for the gift valued at $566,457 from the Greenwich Community Projects Fund, Inc. for the September 11th memorial at COSCOB Park. This includes, as was mentioned by Joe, a $25,000 endowment, which will be given to the town to be used for routine maintenance, cleaning, and an insurance policy against vandalism at the site. Joe Siciliano, Director of Parks and Rec, was with us this evening, and he presented the many guests who were with us who are still in the room. Many of these people had lost family members at 9/11. Chuck Hilton, the designer of the project, was with us. He explained that over 3 years ago they began working on the project. They wanted a waterfront site which would have a connection to New York City and Washington, D.C. They wanted to create an ethereal quality memorial design. They liked the COSCOB Park site because it gives access 365 days a week. The memorial will be on a bluff that's in the passive recreation area. It will be dedicated to 32 individuals who lost their lives on 9/11. It will consist of 2 clear glass towers, 20 inches square, 12 feet high, made of Starfire glass. A sample of the glass was shown to us. It's quite stunning. The flag will be etched in the glass, as will be the names of the deceased. The 2 glass towers will sit on a granite terrace 30 feet in diameter. The towers will be footed 4 feet down to assure that they are permanently there. There were many questions about safety issues considering the conditions in Coscob Park on the water. Family members approved of the design. That's how they came to this design, and they also consulted other donors. There will also be a separate memorial for one Greenwich resident who died at Shanksville, and this will be in a pavement marker adjacent to these 2 glass towers. James Rittman, who headed fundraising, spoke to us for a moment. He explained they started 1.5 years ago, launching the campaign to raise money, which they raised from businesses and individuals. The funding is 100% in hand. There were a few questions about the project from our committee. One was the location of it. Did it prevent use of that space for something else? It was pointed out that this is a passive area of the park. There's an active area with ball fields, etc., ball field. And then there's the passive area, which has walking trails for the most part. And it will be in that area that has a wildflower meadow surrounding it. So it will create a peaceful atmosphere. The other question was the aesthetics, using glass. Was it strong? Was it the right thing to use? This total memorial will take up 1/10 of an acre. The park consists of 10 acres, as you may know. After about 30 minutes of conversation, we took a vote. The vote was 12-0-0. Thank you, and I thank the members from the community organization who came to present this.
Thank you. Michael Warner, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow members. I won't repeat what you just heard. You heard the basic facts. The discussion in the Finance Committee centered on 2 issues. One was this clearly this was a spot that is wanted by the loved ones of the people who lost lives on September 11th, and they wanted a site where they could reflect and contemplate and recognize the life of the person that they lost. And we heard powerful testimony from the individuals who wanted the memorial for that reason. Another issue came up, and that is from some of the members were asking, clearly this is a place that is important to the loved ones. Is it the best place for the town? Does it give ample recognition for visitors and people who come to Greenwich where they can also see our memorial to the 9/11? And the proponents of this, the architects and some of the other members who testified, had recounted that they had tried a number of locations and were not able to find a location that was more central than the one they chose. And importantly, they also recognized that and stated that there will be certain, quote, programmatics associated with this site. That is, there are dollars set aside so school children can come and visit and learn about 9/11 and understand the significance of that site. And speaking for myself, I thought that was a powerful, useful addition to this gift. And as a result of that discussion, your Finance Committee voted 10-0-2. The 2 votes, abstentions, were just people who were concerned primarily that this might not be the best site. But certainly it was an overwhelming endorsement from almost everyone that the town should have a site like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Discussion on item 8. Mr. Von Keyserling.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. There's no question about the solemnity of this and how great an impact Greenwich felt from this event. I thought it might be appropriate, if it's all right with you, Mr. Moderator, to have the people who have really pushed this project and developed the money for it, worked very hard, if they would stand up, because I think they deserve an applause. Thank you, Mr. Lundgren.
Further discussion on item 8. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 8, and proceed to pull your delegation. Item number 9 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? Jason Auerbach, representing the petitioners.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Moderator Pro Tem, and fellow members. Whereas pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 9-203 and 9-205, the town of Greenwich shall establish the number of members of the Greenwich Board of Education. Whereas electors of the town desire elections for members of the Board of Education to be competitive and encourage political parties to offer multiple candidates for elections by citizens. Resolved by the representative town meeting that effective November 4th, 2015, the Greenwich Board of Education shall have 9 members. This was put in by a petition of over 20 electors.
All right, and you are making that motion. Is there a second? Second. All right, I will now turn to our town attorney, Wayne Fox, and ask if you have an opinion as to the legal order of item 9.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. This is an item which we had discussed at a joint meeting of the Education Committee and the Legislative and Rules Committee last week, I should say. It is my opinion that this matter is not in legal order. It is my opinion that for an item such as this to be in legal order, it must be detailed enough so that the body understands the terms and conditions that it is being asked to vote in favor of or reject. It is also important that the various options that might be considered and might be part of what is considered by the body is fully set out in the document itself. I don't think this meets either of those requirements. I don't think there is sufficient detail. I don't think all of the possible options are considered. I don't think it's in a position where you folks on this body would know what, in fact, you are voting on. And for that reason, I say it is not in legal order, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. The way parliamentary procedure works is when an item is moved and seconded, it must first be accepted by the chair before it is before the body. Based on the opinion of our town attorney that item 9 is not in legal order, I cannot accept item 9. So it is not before us. All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda. We do have, I do have the results of the vote on item 7, and we will need to await the result of the vote on item 8 before we can proceed to adjourn. All right, item 7 was a resolution to appoint Ryan Oka to be an alternate member of the Claims Committee. Those in favor, 88, opposed, 92, abstaining, 9. That item has failed. All right, we will await the final vote tally on item 8 before we can proceed to adjourn. All right, I have a revised vote on item 7. It doesn't change the result, but apparently there was a stray mark that was miscounted on a voting card. So the final tally on item 7 was those in favor 88, opposed 91, abstaining 9. So that item has failed. I have the result of the vote on item 8, which is the 9/11 Memorial Acceptance of a Gift. Those in favor, 168, opposed 8, abstaining 10. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting, and absent objection, this meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.